Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. I was here 2 weeks ago sitting in on Professor McClendon's class. It was an venture capital class, and I hadn't been in that room in years. I graduated from Crummer 17 years ago. I got my MBA here, and I drove down 417 2 nights a week and spent a lot of hours here. And my wife and I have 3 kids. Our daughter, who's in the middle, was born a week before I started the program, and our youngest son was born the week I graduated from here. So we had a busy 2.5 years here at Crummer. Lots of things to celebrate. So I wanted to spend some time today talking a little bit about my background and just sharing some thoughts about leadership. And the more I learn, the more I discover that I'm never going to know all of it. It's art, it's science, it's psychology, it's math. There's a lot that goes into this. But I've been fortunate enough to work for a company for almost 27 years, where we focused as much on the results, or as much on how we worked with each other as results. So you were held accountable to, you need to get the results, but you need to do it with the right leadership behaviors. And we're held accountable to those things. And I think over time, it teaches you to influence. The whole command and control idea is not accepted at Disney. You need to engage people's hearts and minds to get the work done. And I think it's a really smart way to do business. It's counterintuitive, it takes a lot more time, and it's a lot harder, but the sustainable results you get long-term are there. So a little bit about myself. My dad was in the hospitality industry, and I remember when I was in 8th or 9th grade, I made the statement that I was never going to work in the hospitality industry. I think I'd be rebellious, and so here I am in the hospitality industry. And we find that at Disney. There are lots of, we look at retention, and we find that friends and family of cast members have the highest retention rates. When people tell them to come to casting because you're wired a certain way. And I think this is an important part of what you need to understand is what your talent is, and where you belong. And not everyone belongs at Disney. I have some good friends from college who, they shouldn't be at Disney. They shouldn't be interacting with normal people. They definitely shouldn't be at Disney. So I think this idea that you need to figure out what your values are, and if you can align those values, and most of the time they're aligned with the company and the job you're doing, you're going to be really happy with what you're doing. But you have to believe in it. So we grew up, and he worked for Marriott. We moved all over the country 10 or 12 times before I was in 5th grade. And I ended up going to Boston University and studied political science. And as I always tell people who are looking to come to Disney, I said, if you want to be successful at Disney, you should study political science. This liberal arts degree is very powerful to work in a hospitality company. Of course, that's not true at all. So it was sort of a random kind of thing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. That sounded fun. So I worked at the Contemporary on the college program. We have about 6,000 college program students that work at Walt Disney World at any one time. And it's a great way to bring in really fresh talent, high energy people. It's a great marketing piece. They go back to their campuses and talk about their experience. So we're really held accountable to make sure we create an incredible program for them. And a lot of them get college credit. Obviously, I didn't get college credit because there was no political science class at Walt Disney World. But there's a lot of great hospitality programs, and that's what we do. So when I graduated from BU, I came back down to Walt Disney World and moved back into Vista Way, which is a college housing area. And I had applied for the Eurodisney Internship program. So Eurodisney was the first one we did that. And since then, we've done this with Hong Kong and we've done it with Shanghai. We'll hire a whole bunch of people from that country. We'll bring them over to the US for 6 months, 9 months to work here, really get to see what the job is like and what the culture is like. And then they go back to their countries and open the park and hopefully get into leadership roles eventually. And what we've learned over time, and this was a good learning with the Eurodisney, now called Disneyland Paris. Back in the early 90s, the word Euro was not popular. The Eurotunnel was over budget and behind schedule. The Euro was being introduced as a currency and no one liked it. And so we decided to scrap Eurodisney. And we decided instead of competing with Paris, we would just name it Disneyland Paris. And instead of telling people come to Disney for a week and go to Paris for the day, we decided, you know what, go to Paris for the week and come to Disney for the day. That's a better plan. So I worked at parking cars. When they interviewed me and said, well, what would you like to do on your internship program? I said, what do you have? And they said, we have parking. I said, that's exactly what I want. I was hoping you'd say parking. because that's what I was looking to do. That's why I went to school for my 4-year degree, is to park cars. And so people ask me at BU, what are you doing after you graduate? I said, well, I'm going to go park cars in Florida. And they said, well, okay. I said, but I have a plan. And so I came down here, I parked cars at Epcot, and then I moved to France on January 1st, 1992. That was about 3 months before the park opened. And what do you think my first job in France was? International parking. I'd done domestic parking. I wanted to get international parking so I could broaden my portfolio. So I remember being on that plane, flying to France. I spoke about 10 words of French. I'd never lived in France. I'd never been in a management trainee role. There was basically many things that were just not on my side. And I said, I can go over there and be stressed out about this and be self-conscious about this, or I can treat this like an incredible adventure, and I know I'm going to get into a lot of really incredibly ridiculous situations, but this is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to have a lot of great stories later. And I took it that way. And sure enough, boy, that was the case. When I got there, they put me in charge of the kennel. So there's a lot of dogs in France. People take them everywhere. So they said, Dan, you're going to work in parking, but we have the kennel, and you need to make sure it gets built on time and it gets built. So of course they give me the blueprints. So there I am walking around the site with a really nice suit on, blueprints I can't read in a language I can't speak. And I go out every day, and the guys are out there building the kennel, laying the foundation, and I pull out the blueprints, and I'm like, yep, that's the kennel. And I'd look at them, and they'd nod to me, and I'd get lunch. I'd come back in the afternoon, and they'd made some progress, and I gave them the thumbs up, and they gave me the thumbs up, and had a little glass of wine, and kept going. And after about a month and a half, the kennel's built. It's beautiful. I'm very proud of it. It's still there. And so that's how we got through it. And if you've ever been, if English is a second language, you know how this is. I mean, the accents. And I lived there for 5 years. And so after 12 months, I was fluent. I could have a conversation. But 22 years later, no one has ever asked me in France what part of France I'm from. Somehow they just don't believe I'm from anywhere that sounds like that. And just, when the phone would ring, I'd break out in a cold sweat. Oh my gosh, the phone. At least when you're with somebody, you can see their body language and use your hands and your facial expressions. And it was really challenging, and I grew a lot. It was a very painful experience, but I grew a lot. So my wife and I, she's from France, and so we were living together. And one day we're in the kitchen doing our dishes and cleaning up, and she said, so your visa's going to expire in like a couple of months. I said, I know. She said, well, what's your plan? What are you going to do? I said, well, I've been thinking about that. I said, I have an idea. She said, what? I said, well, if we got married, I could get a green card to stay here. She said, that sounds good. So that was the engagement. And she still gives me a hard time about that. We're living outside of Paris. I mean, there's so many places I could have proposed, and it was doing dishes. And it wasn't a proposal, it was more of an agreement, So we had an 8-week engagement, we got married, and we stayed over there for 5 years, and I worked in operations that whole time. And then eventually we moved back to the US in 1996, and we've been here ever since, back in Orlando. Coming back, I worked at Epcot for a while as an operations manager. I ran some of the international pavilions at Epcot. We have the World Showcase back there. I ran the American and the Japanese pavilions. I opened Test Track and some of the attractions and got some great experience. And at that point, I ended up coming back and went to Crummer. So this was about 8 years after I started working, and decided I want to further my education. I didn't think I was ever going to go back to school again. I was not a good student. I didn't particularly enjoy school. Well, I enjoyed school. I didn't necessarily enjoy class. But then when I started working, I realized how much time I had in that 4 years to learn. And so I said, I want to go back and try this again. And it's one of the proudest things ever, me getting my MBA. I mean, I just couldn't believe it that I was able to kind of pull that off, especially with financial accounting. It almost killed us. At that point, I left parks and I went into resorts. And I worked at Walt Disney World Resorts for 6 years. And as I tell the people at Disney, I said, this is sort of a secret, but parks is 10 times easier to run than the hotels are. The hotels, the attention to detail. And actually one of the key classes I took here was a statistics class. And we were talking about Six Sigma and sample sizes. And it hit me at that point, because at the time I was a couple years later, I was the general manager of the All-Star Resort. And the All-Star is our value resort. It's where we put all the Pop Warner football teams and all the cheerleaders and all the big sports teams. And if you're coming to Walt Disney World for the first time and you want to pay as little as possible to get the Disney experience, you stay at the All-Star. And it has almost 6,000 rooms in it. It's 5,920 rooms, I think, something like that. 6,000 rooms. And so when I took the statistics class, I was doing the math, and I realized that the All-Star, we have 500 housekeepers come in every day to get ready and to clean all the rooms. And I did the math, and I said, you know what? If we clean 99% of the rooms correctly today, we're going to have 60 families at the front desk complaining about a dirty room. Because you math wizards out there, 1% of 6,000 is 60. That's a lot. If we get 99.9% right, we still have 6 rooms that people paid good money for and didn't get cleaned correctly. So it really pulled me into this mode of, wow, we have to be really good at what we do, and we have to be great at the organizational skills, but we have to be really great at explaining why it is so important to clean these rooms. And I learned a ton about what motivates people. And at the All-Star, for me, it was a great awakening, because I got trained in housekeeping. When you work anywhere at Walt Disney World, the first month, you get a costume on and you go work these jobs. And they train you to work these jobs. You don't necessarily do them well, but you're right in the midst of it. And I got trained in housekeeping, and they sent me out to clean. And a housekeeper, the All-Star, has an 18-room section. And sometimes they have checkouts, and sometimes they have stayovers, which is less time. But you have to clean 18 rooms a day. It's 36 beds you have to make. I mean, the list goes on. It's an incredible job. And when I got there, I started to do room inspections. And I told the team, because I take the statistics, I said, look, me out walking around your resort and looking at rooms randomly is not going to be a metric I'm using to determine if you have enough clean rooms. I can't walk enough rooms to find out if you're doing a good job cleaning rooms. However, clean rooms is the key to a hotel. And if I don't show up here every single week walking and looking at rooms, I'm not sending the message that clean rooms are important. And so we're going to walk every single week. We're going to walk rooms, and we're going to see how we're doing. And I thought that the housekeepers would say when I got out there, I don't want the general manager and the ops manager coming to my rooms. Why would I don't want trouble. Well, I'd get out there every day, and on the balconies, the housekeeper would be up there waving. Come up and look at my rooms. Because they were so proud of the job they were doing on getting these rooms clean. And what I learned over time was I started to see, wow, we have some great housekeepers here. So I went back to casting, where we hire everybody, and I said, how do you hire housekeepers at Walt Disney World? How do you choose to figure out? I said, I know people complain probably to you about not hiring great people. I said, I'm meeting all these great housekeepers. How do you do this? And they said, well, we've done lots of studies, and we hired the Gallup organization to look at the profile of people and predictive talents. And we concluded to hire a great housekeeper. If we understand what they do in their off time, we can really understand about how great they're going to be predictively. And I said, what's that? So what do you think they told me? What does a housekeeper do in their off time? They clean, because they have a personal problem with clutter and disorganization. And the pride factor they have, knowing that there's a clean room for these families that are coming there, and their kids are going to be in a clean bathtub, and the place is going to be spick and span, was how they hired people. So I said, how much do we pay for this consultant? They said hundreds of thousands of dollars to find out that great housekeepers love cleaning. And the list goes on. And so we learned over time is the kind of people we hire at Disney, a lot of them are extroverted, they're high energy, they're involved in their communities, they love working on teams. One of the questions we ask in interviews at Disney is, how much do you like to contribute individually and work independently? And when people hear that, a lot of people are trying to read in the question. And when the people say, I like to be independent, really, manage my own work, we say, well, thanks for playing. Maybe you can go down the street and get a job, because no one does anything independently at Walt Disney World. There's 74,000 cast members, and everybody's working together to pull this thing off every day. So we learned that along the way. At that point, I left, and I had a few other jobs. I was a vice president of a few of the parks, and I ended my career at the Magic Kingdom the past 3 years. And then broke off about 4 months ago, and now my company, I went from leading 12,000 cast members to working for my wife, and I'm in charge of our dog now. That's my job. And I don't plan on hiring anybody. I like to contract people to help me with things. And so at first my wife said, what can I do? And now I wake up in the morning, I'm like, we had some things due today. She's like, yeah, don't you keep it up. So we're partnering and figuring that piece of it out. So some of the concepts I want to share with you today to get into, I think there's a couple areas. One is on a personal level, how you think about your life and how you get things prioritized. I don't know if you all expected to hear that today, but it's important. And I'm working on a book right now and some concepts. And I was talking to the gentleman who's helping me publish it. And he said, pick the person you're writing the book to. Put in your mind one person and write the book to them. Now, who's your audience? And I said, well, I want my audience to be everyone, because I want everyone to buy the book. He said, it doesn't work that way. Who's your audience? And I realized it's probably a 20-something or 30-something manager, leader, who is an up-and-comer, and what can I tell them that I thought was important as I thought about working at Disney and trying to keep my life in order, under control, and keep work under control, and just get it all done and actually enjoy the ride. And so I've broken it down into 3 areas. So I think the first thing I'd have you all think about, which is important, is what are your priorities? What are you trying to get done in your life? And every time you hear that question, you're like, whoa, this is too big. I can't do that now. You know, my wife and I, we started financial planning like, 8 years ago. And someone said, go to a financial planner. Because we just tried to save as much money as we could. We had no plan. I went to financial planner. He said, all right, well, how old do you want to live? What? And what year do you want to retire? I said, I have no idea. And how much money do you want to have available every year after you retire? I'm like, all right, well, we'll see you next year. We're going to think about this. And it took us a few years to actually tackle these big questions. And I think a lot of us get intimidated by these big questions. We just said, look, we just love being busy. Put my head down and just do a lot of activity so I don't have to think about these things. But I realized over time, if you really have a vision of who you want to be and what you're trying to get done, clarity is a very powerful thing. And so I'll tell you what kind of how I've figured this out as I've gone. So there's 3 big pillars I think about in my life, and there's 3 things that I want to do well, and I'm the only one who can evaluate myself for it. I do get feedback from many people, my parents, my kids, my wife, employees, a lot of people. But I always tell people, run your own race. Don't let anyone tell you what success looks like. Because society is going to say you have to have, the more wealth you have, the more successful you are. And every culture has a different definition of success. But I'll tell you, only you can decide what that's going to be. And don't get caught up in that. Because I've been in, my wife and I do races, we run, and I've done a couple of the short triathlons. And I train, I know what my pace is. I start the race, and I pick some random person next to me. I want to keep up with them. I'm like, why would I do this? My wife's like, well, because it's a 12-year-old girl. It's embarrassing. But true story. But you run your own race. You have to decide what success is going to look like and use the people you trust around you to help you form that. So there's 3 pillars I have as I think about how I prioritize my life and what my goals are. And I have this concept called the gap. This is what I want to be. This is what I want my reputation to be. This is what I want to be able, if someone said, describe yourself, I want to be able to describe myself this way. And then there's the things I actually do, and the behaviors and the actions. And often there's a gap, right? I want to be a very generous person. Okay, good. How much money have you given to a charity or nonprofit organization this year? 0. Okay, so why do you think you want to be generous if you're not willing to do that? And once again, it's not a judgment. It's just you have to be real with yourself. What is your goal? And what do you want to be? And what are you going to do to get there? So, number 1, little quiz. What do you think my number 1 priority is in my life?
Family.
Right. You should say family, because that should be the answer. But it's not the answer. I am the priority of my life. And now I tell people that, and they think, well, okay, it's a little selfish. So I am an only child, so I can be a little selfish. But reality is I've learned over time, and it is counterintuitive, before you can help your family, before you can be great at work, before you can do anything, you have to feel good and be square, know what you're about, have the right energy level, be fit, have emotional intelligence, know how to deal with things. And so I always tell people, reinvest in yourself all the time. And I've seen, and I've read some great books about this, is you think about athletes. And how often do you hear an athlete brag after a big game that they only slept 6 hours last night? Right? They would never say that. It's irresponsible. They're professionals. You get plenty of sleep. How many would you hear say, yeah, I don't really think, I guess I'm supposed to drink a lot of water every day, but I don't really get a chance to do that because I'm so busy training. No, they hydrate and they eat right and they do all the things. Now, they're professionals. Here's the irony is professionals train 95% of the time and they compete 5% of the time. And we, out in the real world, we work 95% of the time. We train probably, 98% of the time. We train 2% of the time. But we have the same stresses on us, the same demands as professional athletes do. Maybe not physically, but certainly the stress levels are the same. And so we have to rethink that. And as they say on airplanes, right, if the oxygen mask comes down, there's a reason you put it on yourself first. Because if you pass out, you can't put it on the small child or the elderly person next to you. You have to be in the right place to be able to do that. And even at Disney, we have duty managers in each of the parks. And the duty manager has the radio. They are tactically in charge of the park. If there's an emergency, if someone has a heart attack, if someone falls and hurts themselves, the duty manager is leading and managing the park at that point on behalf of the executives. And when we get bomb threats at Disney, and when there's a bomb threat, what do you think the duty manager wants to do? They want to go to where the trash can is, because I should be there with my people. We have to train them. You don't go to the trash can. You go away from the trash can. You go to a place where you're going to be safe. So if you show up there and something happens and you're not in charge, no one's running things anymore. No one's in charge. So it's certainly counterintuitive. And we can disagree on this. Like I said, this is my opinion, but taking care of yourself first. So for me, that's physical fitness. If I can stay in shape, if I can work out, I can check the box for that day that I've done what I need to do, because that's my ultimate therapy, right? My stress, all the dopamine that I get from going out. If I can work out hard enough to really feel like totally exhausted when I get to work, I'm like, okay, what are you going to do to me? Like what I haven't already done to myself this morning. I'm like, I totally almost threw up this morning. So what are you going to do that's going to be worse than that? So it may be exercise, it may be meditation, it may be your faith, whatever it is that gets you recentered and feeling good about yourself and confident about yourself. Once you're ready and you're equipped and you got the right mental attitude, you're taking care of your finances, you feel good about that, because if you don't take care of your finances and your future, that causes stress. If you don't take care of your health, that causes stress. So you just got to make sure you're in the right place. Then once you do that, then family. And for me, it's about family. And family is, it's not just about, you remember your wife's birthdays, right? These are the big ones. But it's stuff like take the trash out. It's stuff like feed the dog. It's like call your daughter and see how she's doing today. And call your mom on the way home from work. And they're just all very small action behavioral things that contribute to that. So if someone says, do you want to be a good dad? Yes, I do. Okay. Then when your son lies to you about turning his homework in and you find out he's lying, do you talk to him about it? Or you just say, look, I don't even want to deal with that today. So if I don't deal with that today, I'm doing him a disservice because he needs to be held accountable. And I'm just talking from a recent story that happened last week. So, when you go to bed at night, if he gets home late for curfew, are you calling him on that? When your daughter, you hear a tone in her voice, something doesn't sound right, do you call her back? Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Do you check in on your parents? All these things, so they're all behavioral kind of things. You just have to decide how you're going to hold yourself accountable to deliver, and that's number 2. And for me, number 3 is career. And that's probably where we get the most feedback, right? We kind of know how we're doing most of the time. Certainly at the Magic Kingdom, I go home every night knowing, all right, I had 6 moments today, 4 I handled really well, 1 was okay, and 1 I just really blew it. I got to make up for that tomorrow. And I go back, I figure out what I did well today, what I have to work on, and as my grandfather used to say, and I have a written note on my desk I look at all the time, do your best, then forgive yourself, which I think is great. He retired Rear Admiral of the Navy, so he was a very much an achiever, but he said you do your best, and then you forgive yourself. You go back and you try again the next day. So that's how I kind of think about how, in my mind, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Like when I was doing my MBA, that fitness thing, that dropped off. I didn't do nearly as much as I wanted to because I just didn't have enough time, hours in the day. And so that 2-year period, I had to sacrifice that. And so this whole thing is about trade-offs and sacrificing. And so every week, at the end of the week, I kind of go through my mind, how did I do this week? Well, you said you're going to be home Monday night, and you didn't get home, so the fish got cold, and you didn't have dinner, and then your wife asked you to do something. All right, it was a bad week for family. How'd you do at work? I had 2 great speeches, and we made some money this week. All right, check. You did well there. Did you get to work out? I worked out 3 days. I want to work out 5 days, so I got a half a point. All right, I got 1.5 points this week out of 3. That's a pretty good week. It's just about how much you want to hold yourself accountable to what your goals are. The other piece of this, I think when you start to get in the leadership side of this, is it's similar. There's 3 areas, and this is what I'm focusing on. So the first one is self. So you come back. If you're going to lead a team of people, are you doing all the things I just talked about? Plus, do you have the right mindset? And I'm doing a lot of reading these days. I have more time to do reading, and as I do speeches, I want to hone my skills on this kind of stuff. So there's a great book called Mindset I would highly recommend. And a lot of you may have read it. And mindset, the idea is there's 2 kinds of mindsets, right? There's a fixed mindset and there's a growth mindset. And the fixed mindset says, I was raised a certain way, I only have a certain level of intelligence, I can't change things much. I'm just going to do the things I'm good at because failure is not good. I don't want to try new things, so I try new things, I may fail. And if I had taken that approach when I went to France, I'd never be speaking French because I wouldn't open my mouth. I wouldn't have ever learned anything. But I was willing to put myself out there and sound ridiculous because when you try things, you get better at them. The growth mindset says, I can improve myself and I can get better and I'm willing to fail. And actually, success is not the goal, trying is the goal. People who only look at success as being the only marker in their life about how they kind of rate themselves, they're let down a lot. And success is kind of like this fleeting thing. But if you go and say, every day I'm going to have this open mind and learn new things, I've found you have a lot more interesting experiences. You're much more in touch with people. You can read into people and what they're saying to you. But it is a mindset, and you have to work on it because it doesn't come naturally. So once you kind of get everything buttoned down for yourself, then a lot of you are going to lead teams, right? And you may be an individual contributor, as we say at Disney, where you're running, you may be running accounting or an individual staff position. And then some of you are going to be leading people. You're going to have people that are taking their cue from you. And that's a whole nother adventure on this leadership journey is, okay, I'm responsible for a group of people now who are there to get work done on my behalf. How do I go after that? And so there's kind of 4 areas I really think about this. And the number one thing, the other 3 are important, but the number one thing, and this is the most important thing, if you can't do anything else in leadership, make sure you pick the right talent. Get the right people on your team. And this is about getting yourself in the right job and get the people on your team that are great at what they do. And this is like the housekeeper thing I was talking about. If I bring a housekeeper in, I don't train them, and they don't particularly like their management or anything else, and there's a bunch of problems, if they're great and they love cleaning, they're going to do that because that's what they aspire to do. If I have people who love service, which we try to hire those people at Disney, no matter what I do, they're probably going to be great because they love giving service. And whether you love being service-oriented or not, that's not a good or bad. It's just a fact. Some people really love service and other people don't. And once again, it's not a judgment, but the job matches with that. So you really need to think about talent. So I'm going to do a quick exercise. I'll just ask you all to cross your arms. Just cross your arms. This is talent. This is like, yeah, this is good. All right, this is what it should be. Now cross them the other way. Okay, you can still do it, but y'all don't look comfortable. It's like, it's not quite the same. This is the subtlety with it. And I think people get caught up in this thing is, well, if I focus and study something and really go after it, I can become really good at it. And I'll agree with that statement. You can, but you can't be great. And in this world, it's too competitive. You have to find what your predictive talent is. And I used to think it's through training and development and motivation and pay. And then my wife and I had 3 kids. And I realized that, in my opinion, 98% of what you're good at is wired into you. It's from birth. And if you just have to discover what that looks like. And that's clear with musicians, athletes. When you look at people our professionals, they had a talent and they developed it. And you got to figure out what that is. So there's all kinds of tools out there. There's Myers-Briggs. There's Strength Finders, which I love. This Gallup organization does that. There's the DISC assessment. You can find a lot of different ones, and they all measure different things. But you just got to figure out, if you're not self-aware, what are you great at? Where are you going to excel? What environments are you going to excel in? What kind of work are you going to excel in? When I did the strength finders, I discovered that I have developer, positivity, arranger, relationship. Most of what I do is social. I have to be with people all day long. So every moment I am in my office by myself, doing emails, I'm just keeping the administrative wheels turning, but I'm not adding any value because I'm not necessarily a strategic thinker. And I don't have a lot of futuristic thinking. There's a lot of things I don't do well, but I know that when I'm with people, I get energy, I get better ideas, I'm able to generate more ideas. And so I measure myself every week. How many hours did I spend this week with people? Because that's where I was going to add value. And if I wasn't out there doing that, I saw things start, I wasn't up to speed, I couldn't represent the Magic Kingdom in meetings, and so I had to do that. So it's just what kind of environments should you be in, and the people who are working for you, what kind of people do you need on your teams, what talents are you looking for? And usually you can find that one person on your team who's a superstar, use them as the sample, and say, how do I get 5 people like you? Because those are the people who are going to find extra value. They're going to make your life much easier. You're going to have more time. You're going to have less emergencies to deal with because you can get all these people who are ahead of the curve. It's hard though, because we say, well, look, I didn't hire these people. I inherited them. At Disney, you get transferred to a new job and you get the team you get. Well, now it's up to you to push these people and set expectations for these people and find out if they're in the right jobs or not. So once you have the right talent, you build relationships. And relationships, and I know this is many businesses, this is what makes Walt Disney World spin, is the relationships. There is no big book that says how you get things done. You call someone who knows someone who used to work with, who helps you get something for something, it's very organic. And so I would just tell you, when you talk about relationships, everyone intuitively knows, well, yeah, relationships are important. Well, what are you doing, once again? Do you want to be known as someone who has great relationships with people? Yes, I do. Okay, what are you doing to actually make that happen? How much do you know the people working for you? Do you know what motivates them? Do you know what their other past lives have been? At Disney, basically at Disney, the way we operate, a lot of times, unfortunately, if you haven't done it at Disney, it really doesn't count. You really haven't done it because you haven't done it here. So we get these incredibly talented people that come outside and they've done all kinds of incredible things. They've been in Afghanistan, they've run units in the Army, they've been in labs, they've done incredible stuff. They come to Disney and we try to tell them, well, yeah, but it's different here. It's like, yeah, that was a lot harder. But we have to get there. So this idea of building relationships, getting to know people, spending time. When I had new teams, I'd have lunch with each of my direct reports for a couple hours. And the only rule at that lunch was we can't talk about work, because that's all we're going to talk about after today. I want to know where you're from, your background, your family, your kids, just as much as I can know about you. So when I start working with you, I can tap into all those things. Now, that's a very cultural thing. Because what I learned in France was a lot of people are like, my personal life's really none of your business. And I learned that quickly. So everyone is going to be more or less open about themselves. Some people will tell you more than you want to know, and some people are just, they're real close. You have to measure that. But your boss, the person you work for, I tell people that's the most important relationship you have. They rate your performance, they give you money, they decide what your future's going to look like. So do you know what your leader values? And do you know how they like to get work done? And how do you be someone that's going to make their life easier? And I've worked with many different leaders over time. And some people say, well, my leader should adjust to my style so I can get my work done. And I'm like, well, you're lucky if that happens, but you need to figure out what's going on with them. And I've had two leaders, very different. One of them was Carl Holtz, and he was the president of the cruise line for a while. He used to run the resorts. Carl, when he was coming to the hotel to have a meeting, I'd have a list of 20 things to talk to him about. I would pick 3. And when he got in my office, I'd pick 1. And if I could get that message to him in 10 seconds or less, that would get approved. I know you'll have to go. Thanks for coming. Thanks. Yeah, take care. Carl was like 10-second guy. If you can get your message across in 10 seconds or less, he'd say, yeah, send me a deck on that. And it would turn into a 6-month project. But if you could hook Carl, and he said, got it, I meant yes, and you get $1 million approved on the spot. It was just that moment. And I learned how to communicate with him. He had a very short attention span. Once again, it's not my fault if that's the case or not. I have to learn how to work with him. And the other thing was I worked for other leaders. One of my vice presidents of resorts, detail-oriented to the nth degree. I mean, he'd drive you up the wall. He needed to know everything. I remember at the All-Star, I called him one night. A pickup truck came to the security gate. It was a former cast member. They had a handgun in their car. They were coming, we're not sure why. We called the police. He's been arrested. He didn't have a permit. His daughter works in one of the parks, and I was so proud of myself. So, there you go. Any questions? There's a pause. What kind of gun was it? Because he just gets it. He taught me detail. And so you're going to have all kinds of different leaders you're working for. So how do you plan relationships? How do you get out in your operation and walk around and get to know the frontline cast members and just be out there as much as you can? Those relationships pay off in many, many different ways you don't even know. Clear expectations is number 3. You set clear expectations for performance. The companies you're working for, if they walked and talked to 10 employees and said, what is your purpose here? What answer would you get? And at Walt Disney World, I like to think that at Walt Disney World, if you ask 10 cast members that, 8 out of 10 will tell you, I'm here to make sure our guests have the best vacation they ever had and create magic. That's what they tell you. That's our purpose. I may be a custodial cast member. I may be a concierge cast member. I may be a parking attendant. My goal is to make sure every guest has a great vacation. So that's important. People need to know they're part of something bigger. So setting the expectations is key. And lastly is reward and recognition, which we do surveys every 2 years at Disney. We are great at reward and recognition, and we all always score miserably on a survey with that. Because somehow we just cannot touch enough people. There's so many great things going on every day, and there's so little recognition, because we're always dealing with the negative things. And so I had a system, and I had cards on my desk. I'd have all kinds of stationery and reminders. I told people, put cards on your computer. At the end of the week, get 5 cards. And if you can't find 5 people in your organization that have done something that you really appreciated, you probably need to leave that organization. You got a big problem. Find time, send them a text, send them an email, send them a handwritten note, and reward and recognize it. Look at the expectations, and when people deliver that, reinforce that. And that's what you try to do, reinforce behavior. You're not trying to make them feel better. You're not trying to motivate them. You're trying to reinforce the behavior. So if you kneel down and talk to a small boy and made his day, and we got a guest letter on that, I'm going to reward and say thank you for paying individual attention to this guest and singing them happy birthday and making sure they felt special. Because feeling special is something we try to do at Walt Disney World. So you get the right talent on your team. You make sure you have great relationships so you can build trust with each other. You set clear expectations for performance. When people do it well, you reward and recognize. And when they don't do it well, you give them feedback. And somehow feedback has become this term that is like the code word for you really messed up and you're going to get fired. I don't know what happened, because feedback used to be a good thing, and now it's like, I'm getting feedback. What's that mean? I said, we got to demystify this thing. And I was just talking to a pharmaceutical company. I said, how do you handle someone's late for a meeting regularly? How do you give feedback? And everyone came up with all this stuff. I said, here's how you do it. Hey, you're regularly late. Don't be late. There's the feedback. Move on. And people just make it this big, I have to have a half-hour conversation and talk to you about your mother and how you were raised. No, you're late. You're doing a great job, but you're late. It's disrespectful for the team. I need you to be on time. Can you do that? Yes. Great. We're done now. You move on. But somehow we've gotten so defensive. Anything we say to people is like, oh, what do you mean by that? Do you not like me anymore? Is this the beginning of some sort of performance thing where you want me out? Just tell me the truth. The truth is, I want you to be on time. That's all. Move on. And so we got to get better at that. There's 2 books I'm reading right now that I'm using a lot of great examples from: Crucial Conversations and Radical Candor. And it's helping me with my wife, with my kids. I mean, it's, like you said, this whole education thing is pretty powerful when you can read these books and try to adapt these things. So once again, what are your goals for your life? What are the general things that you're trying to get to? And whether it's in your mind or you write those down, you need to know what you're trying to be. And then if you're leading teams, you really got to think about, how am I getting myself prepared to do that? And how am I interacting with the team that's I'm getting done work through? All right.